freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gaiman, and this is your Wednesday Masters live chat. That's right. I said it. We don't usually do this, but kind of a big event this week. So we are rocking and rolling. Look who I've got here. I've got the coach. And coach, you were just saying how much you love this day, baby. Let's go.
It's the best day of the entire week. The anticipation, the emotion, all of it. I'm here for it. So let's go.
Also joining us, a debutante in his own right for the first time ever, host of the Inside Golf Podcast, contributor to RickRunGood.com. It's Andy Lack. Andy, welcome.
How's it going, guys? Honored to be here. Coach, I just mentioned to you off air, I've been watching and listening to you forever, so can't wait to get into it, man. It's one of my favorite days of the year as well.
Love it. Love it.
So what I'd love for this to do, to be, gentlemen, is quite interactive. So if you're in the chat right now and you've got a axe to grind with a specific golfer, questions about the weather, waves, or something like that, feel free, because I'll keep it as interactive as possible. But let's start with the forecast, because this is something we've been tracking really all week long. And coach, you never want to get into a situation where weather impacts a major championship. And it looks like we got kind of a wash day on Tuesday. As of right now on Wednesday, it's looking like the rain is going to get out of here like for a while on Thursday morning, but could have some ramifications on the golf course and who ends up playing well.
Yeah, and it's also the type of week that is not normal. You know, most other courses, they'll adjust and you'll have threesomes on both sides and you'll be able to get in. The Masters likes everybody to go from the first tee all the way through. It's always been a point of contention. But when you start to have weather and rain, drying it out is not going to be an issue. This dries as good as any golf course in the world. It's about starting and stopping and how that will affect certain players that are able to do it, not able to do it. So if they can play straight through, I think that's going to be good for everybody. If they have to start and stop, certain advantages to the players that are veterans here and know how to navigate that process.
How would you spend your time, coach? If you had 2 hours in the middle of a round and you had to just sit in the clubhouse, how would you spend your time? Would you play card games? Would you eat lunch? What would you do?
Well, that's the nice thing here. They've got such an array of things to do. They can play video games. The caddies have their own building that they can go to and play video games and cards. It's better than any other course. I would stay clear and I would stay close, but certainly there's a ton to do. Plus, you can go eat. It's just, and sometimes the houses are close enough. You can drive back to your house and hang out there and still make it back to the course in time. So all different kinds of options.
We know famously Hideki Matsuyama played on his phone during that 77-minute rain delay and then came out like a barnstormer. I forgot to mention at the top, producer Jacob in my ear letting me know he's prepared to make it rain here a bit. So he's got just a stack of Paramount Plus gift cards, apparently, an endless amount, which are going to come in super handy this week because you're going to be able to use that to get access to kind of the exclusive, some of the Masters feeds. It's going to be super handy, but we're looking for 100 likes. We hit 100 likes. Jacob starts dropping them in the chat like a madman. Andy, the obvious angle around the weather is probably how it relates to fantasy formats and the idea of potentially stacking golfers in one weather wave or another. It still appears like Friday will be windy for most guys, but maybe most for the afternoon Friday guys.
Yeah, so I would still say as it stands now, and it can even change again, it's the weather. But as we stand now recording this kind of midday on Wednesday, I do think the course will be at its toughest on Friday afternoon. Now, when I say that, do I mean like a two-stroke advantage? No, probably not. We're talking about small edges here, but these small edges add up over time, and that's how you win. And I do think the combination of the largest wind gusts that we get on Friday afternoon combined with the fact that the course is going to have a little bit more time to dry out, and that's when the greens are going to be at their firmest, as opposed to Thursday morning where guys will probably be able to be firing darts because we got so much rain. I think you might get a slight advantage to the guys that go off early on Friday morning, and that will be late on Thursday.
I agree.
So let's game it out then here, Andy. If you're playing 20 lineups, are you making 10 wave stacks? Is it 5 wave stacks? Is it 20? Or are we just kind of leaning on those guys?
Yeah, so it turns out luckily that most of the players that I like anyway have that favorable, quote unquote, favorable side of the draw. But yeah, what I would recommend doing is make a couple stacks, also make a few stacks in the other direction. Remember what happened at the Players, right? Where the wave that everyone thought was going to have the advantage, it ended up being the opposite wave, right? So always hedge your bets there and make a couple stacks in the other direction just in case you're dead wrong. It is the weather, after all, which is often trying to predict the weather has proven to be a fool's errand.
The final 4 groups on Thursday afternoon are jammed packed with just absolute studs. Let me just read you the final 12 players who are going off the course on Thursday afternoon. If you can't find some guys you like in this group of golfers, I think you got issues. So Dustin Johnson, Billy Horschel, Colin Morikawa, we're off to a good start. Will Zalatoris, Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, Jordan Spieth. Here we go. Jacob showing it on YouTube. Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Xander Schauffele, Matt Fitzpatrick, Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy. If you can't find somebody out of those guys that you might be interested in playing or betting on, I think you might have a problem.
Yeah, and this plays into the uniqueness of the Masters every single year, because what do we have, guys, at every single tournament? The last tee times are normally reserved for those outside of the winners' tee times, right? So, but this is all about television, and the Masters for years and years and years refuses to add more time to their TV window. It's exclusive, it's unique, it's special. So you got to put really good players at the end, because that's the 3 to 7 TV window. So it doesn't surprise me that they put Tiger around 10:30 in the morning, and then you put all those guys late, because you can't have all of them close to Tiger's group, because it's going to be a madhouse. So it's really, really strategic how Augusta National did it. But I also think it could play into what you guys were just talking about on the fantasy side. It could play into that, because normally you don't have this many groups at the end with this many stars.
Already halfway home to our free Paramount Plus gift card. So hit the like button. That will trigger producer Jacob making it rain. Let's jump into some of these comments and questions here. Landon in the comments asking about Will Zalatoris. And Andy, Zalatoris obviously always been one of the best ball strikers on the PGA Tour. We saw the little bit of a tweak in that putting stroke and that style that he's using at the match play, and it worked wonders. Is he able to carry that over and try to match, or dare I say, beat his runner-up finish from last year?
I think Augusta National is a perfect golf course for Will Zalatoris in theory. I think this is going to be the type of track that he is going to contend at year after year for many years in the future. And maybe not this year, but I think he will have a Masters when it's all said and done. I think the only concern that I have with Zalatoris is he had like the best putting week of his life last year at the Masters when he finished second. So it was a little bit more, he just made every single putt that he looked at, as opposed to he dominated the course from a tee to green standpoint. Now, that's what he's known for in the first place, is being a dominating tee to green player. So of course he can do that at Augusta this year. The only question is, how is he going to follow up such a peak performance on the greens this year?
It is fascinating, because we know how experience matters around Augusta National. And Coach, the storyline you always hear is about debutantes and how hard it is to win, or how hard it is for them to contend. But I tend to think that the younger guys, they're getting better. I mean, Sam Burns is a really good example. He's won 3 times in the last 12 months. He's never played the Masters. There's also just kind of like awkward situations where you see these meteoric rise for golfers. So how much are you leaning on the experience factor for this week?
A ton. And I think what gets lost in that storyline, Rick, is that part of the reason I think new golfers, or golfers that are in their first or even second times at Augusta National, the pressure gets to them if they get into contention on Saturday and Sunday. That, to me, is more of an important factor than, they just don't know the course. They don't know where to miss it. That's, what we give Tiger and Jack and all these guys that have been playing well there, Jordan Spieth, over the years. We give them that. Well, the pressure is very real. You're talking about winning the greatest golf tournament in the history of time. That, to me, plays into it. But experience, now you start to realize, hey, this is just another golf tournament. When I get to Sunday, my game plan matters. What I do matters. And so, to me, I'm leaning into it because if you look at it, DJ, Cam Smith, Spieth, Tiger, it's always the same names at the top of the leaderboard for a reason. For a reason. And that, to me, is experience.
Yeah, it certainly tends to look that way when you kind of run the numbers or just look at the leaderboards year over year. You see a lot of familiar names. Coach, I'm going to bounce this right back to you because there's been some questions about Cam Smith in here. This one in particular from Rushikesh Panda, who asks about how we feel about Cam Smith. And I know, Coach, not only is Cam Smith top 10 your best bet for this week, but I think you also like him in the outright market, don't you?
Yeah, he's my pick to click. No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he's my guy this week. When you look at everything he's done this season, 2 wins already, and I think believes 7 starts. But I called the players for PGA Tour Live. I saw every single shot that he made over the course of 4 days. He is so dialed in. And then, guys, I think the most important factor at Augusta National, and you guys could argue with me and tell me that I'm wrong, but I think putting is the most important thing at this golf course. And Cam Smith right now is the best putter on the entire PGA Tour, and it's not close. So not only do you need to hit a certain spot on these green complexes, you got to be able to gauge the speed. And like Andy said, if the winds come like we think they are, you could have a different green speed from Thursday morning to Friday afternoon.
I also just see Cam Smith as such a cool customer, right? I mean, like, does anything anywhere ever bother this guy? It's just like, I'm out here playing golf. I'm out here fishing. I'm out here at the DMV. It could be anything. It's unbelievable.
It really is. It really is.
Let's mine into Cam Smith a little bit because there's another question from Mike here, and he's talking about kind of the game theory angle to pivot off of Cam Smith, Andy. And this is more of a daily fantasy question. Cam Smith very likely to be one of the most popular golfers on DraftKings or other DFS sites, and he's priced below $10,000. Some names around him: Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, Victor Hovland, checking in at about half the ownership that Cam Smith is at the moment. Are you willing to eat a chalky Cam Smith, or would you prefer a pivot in kind of these game theory situations?
For me, I'm pivoting, but that's only because I love Rory this week, right? But there are a lot of directions that you can go in this. You can absolutely, if you're as high on Cam Smith as coaches or many other people are, you can eat that chalk easily. There's so many other ways to get different as we go down the board in the 8,000s and even above. There are a bunch of good leverage plays in the 10,000s as well. You mentioned Hovland. Not a lot of people are going to be talking about or playing Morikawa this week. Scheffler's going to go under-owned as well. So it all just depends on how you feel about Cam Smith. I think Cantlay, who I think is $300 cheaper. Cantlay is going to go really under-owned. And I've talked a lot about how I think the public perception is off a little bit on Cantlay right now based on 2 starts in Florida and Texas that are, in my opinion, the 2 most variable tournaments of the year and kind of were a natural letdown spot for Cantlay after coming off such a hot West Coast swing. So depending on how you feel about Cam Smith, there are a lot of interesting pivots in that range. You're right, Rick. That is probably the biggest concern that daily fantasy players should have about Cam Smith because, as coach outlined, he's an impeccable fit for this course. It all just comes down to ownership.
It is, if Patrick Cantlay wins this thing after all the money that I've spent on him in the last couple of months, and I'm not a part of it, I'm gonna be crying myself to sleep. But it is funny how quickly expectations change, and a lot of that can be because of injury or perceived injury. So I want to lump 3 guys together here. Hideki Matsuyama, coach, dealing with injury concerns. Bryson DeChambeau still working his way back from injury. And then we had a guy with back spasms at the match play. I can't remember his name, Jacob.
Give me Oosthuizen.
Yeah, that's the one. You're never, ever getting away from that, coach.
Well, let's start right there then, because that's where I really have an issue with all of this is that you have a player, and no, I'm not over it yet, that decided to go to the first tee instead of withdrawing, which may have allowed me to change my one and done. But what we're talking about here is he healthy enough to play at a place that historically he's had a very, very good track record? And if I'm going off of what I saw at the end of the Players, what I saw at the Valspar pulling out, what I saw at the match play pulling out, I would say I would steer away from him in fantasy but also just in any head-to-heads or top 20s, I'm steering clear of Paul Casey. Now, you talk about Bryson. The only bet that I would make for Bryson, to be brutally honest with you, is to miss the cut because you get a pretty good number there. Because right now, he's hitting it all over the yard. And at Augusta National, you cannot do that. And then finally, Hideki, I wouldn't put any money on him either. I saw him at plus 2,500 still. His neck, he pulled out after 9 holes last week. 9 holes, he pulled out on day 2, I believe, after shooting a 76 in round 1. All 3 of these guys are going to have probably big ownership and a lot of bets on him, and I think all 3 would be a mistake.
Bryson DeChambeau, according to our friends over at Caesars Sportsbook, plus 140, coach, to miss the cut, plus money on the guy.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. There you go. Yeah.
Plus
I think it's worth a little sprinkle.
Plus 140 for Bryson. They're not even listing, unless I'm missing this, they're not even listing a Hideki number. They must be.
Yeah. It was like 2 or 3 days ago I saw, but yeah, the last couple of days, they pulled him off the board.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't even see him on the board here anymore. Okay. So Andy, as this relates to kind of fantasy, I mean, there are ways you could deploy these guys, right? I mean, coach, you could fade them and bet them to miss the cut. Hideki, I think there's a lot of concern about. Abraham Answer, not a lot of answers, more questions than answers when it comes to him, but I haven't heard much. Like these guys for your DFS lineups, are they too risky? I mean, there's always a number for everybody, right? If you told me Abraham Answer, Hideki Matsuyama was going to be 1% owned, wouldn't that be a little bit appealing?
Yeah, so first you have to figure out what you're doing, right? If you're a guy that plays 150 lineups, right, and you're maxing out the Millie Maker at the $15 Millie Maker, does it make sense to take a chance and maybe put Hideki or Bryson or Answer or Casey in 5 lineups and 5 out of your 150? Yeah, 100%. It's golf. I mean, there's still a chance that any of these guys are similar to what we've seen a little bit with Tiger, are underselling, right? Under promising, right? Because, you never know and you want to keep the expectations low. Let's remember last year in Memphis, Bryson had terrible quotes before that tournament. He was talking about how he was hurt. He was coming off of COVID. And what do you know, Sunday afternoon in Memphis, Bryson was leading that tournament on the back 9, right? Answer actually was the one that ended up coming through with that. But if you're a guy, if you're only playing 5-10 lineups, right? If you're playing one lineup, a single entry, that's too risky for me. It's too risky for me. I think if you're mass entering, it's worth a shot, right? With 5-10 lineups at a guy who's 2%. But if you're only a 5 to 10 lineup guy or a 1 to 10 lineup guy, it's still just a bit too risky for me.
Continue to hit that like button. We'll get you a Paramount Plus gift card in the chat here as soon as we cross over the 100 like mark. And coach, there is a top tier player that is, I believe, flying under the radar, maybe not so much in the DFS circles, but if you watch Golf Channel, or even I'm guilty of this on some of the CBS Sports HQ hits, not a lot of conversation around Xander Schauffele, someone who's played here multiple times, someone who is almost a lock to finish T12 every single event, but we don't give him credit for some of those kind of weirder wins like the Olympics or the shadow leaderboard at the Tour Championship. It's just kind of an awkward situation for Xander and his chances this week.
I would severely disagree with you on that we're not talking a little bit about Xander Schauffele. I don't think we're talking about him at all. Nobody's talking about him.
I knew that was coming, and I was still surprised when he did it.
Come on, I got you. Suck you right in. For some reason, he has worked himself into the, and I hate to say this, the Ricky Fowler space, in that we don't consider him, even though the players do, we don't consider him a top-like superstar anymore, because when it comes down to it, to your point, we don't give him credit for the Olympics because there just weren't that many players there, and I don't think it's an old enough tournament to give credit for, even though it means a lot. But when it comes to the PGA Tour and not getting the job done, last couple of years at Phoenix, you got to get the job done. So now there's a reason we don't talk about it, and that shows you how quickly you can go from a top 5 can't-miss player all the way down to, oh, we forgot that he contends at Augusta. And what did he do? What was he in the lead or tied for the lead? I can't remember exactly where he was. And then it all fell apart in the final 3 holes. He's been here before, but Ricky hasn't got it done, and he's not getting it done anywhere else. That's why we're not talking about him. He has to earn his way back into these shows and these types of shows. And there's one way you do that. Win.
Wow, Coach has gone out and compared Xander Schauffele to
Ricky Fowler.
Jacob said he wasn't sure if that file still worked because we haven't used it in so long.
That proves my point. It completely proves my point.
That's so good. Well, Andy, I know Xander's your guy, and there's many layers to this onion, right? We could rehash the last 4 or 5 years of Xander Schauffele and whether he's won enough, whether he doesn't get enough credit. Let's look forward instead of looking back. 2022 Masters, Xander Schauffele, the top of the board, as deep as it's likely been that I can remember. What are the realistic outcomes for Xander this week?
Well, Coach is right. First of all, he's out of sight, out of mind for a reason. But let's not forget that we're still talking about a player who's finished in the top 10 in 50% of the majors that he's played in. He's got 9 of 18 in top 10s in the 18 majors that he's played in. So is Xander a safe bet to play well this week? Absolutely. And I think this is what Xander probably wants, right? I mean, I think, and you could probably make this argument for a lot of the top names, right? But Xander's always been that type of guy he likes to go about his business. He likes his clubs to do the talking. He's not going to give you a ton in interviews. He's not going to be a guy that's ever going to be top 10 in the PIP, right? And he tends to play better when he's coming in under the radar. The worst weeks for Xander are the weeks when kind of the opposite of what Coach said. Everyone's talking about it, and everyone's saying, oh, this is the week when Xander's going to break through. Happened a couple weeks ago at the match play, right? Where everyone was like, Xander has the easiest draw in the entire match play bracket. He's got Finau, who's terrible right now, and Herbert and Kanaya. And what happens to poor old Xander? Very, very disappointing. So I like the fact for Xander that he's returning to a course that he's been so awesome at, but he's not even, what do you guys think? A top 15 storyline this week?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I'd agree. So I think it's a decent spot for Xander in that sense. And I do think that he is a safe bet to play well this week. I think he's probably going to finish top 15, right? But as far as wins, he didn't make my betting card either.
Speaking of betting cards, just looking at the top of the board, Coach. I mean, we talked about the depth of this. We've considered Cam Smith. We've talked all week long about Justin Thomas. We just hit on Xander Schauffele. The number one player in the world, Scottie Scheffler, in the midst of an all-time heater, is one of the favorites to win the Masters. If he were to do so, one, are you going to have any exposure to Scottie Scheffler? And two, would we have to kind of change the way we think about him? I mean, I think the expectation is, or the conversation is, this is just a heater right now, and he got to number one, and that's great, and he's really, really good. But if he wins 4 out of 6 and the Masters, it might be different conversations.
Here's the struggle I have with Scottie Scheffler is when I watch his feet, I see an amateur golfer. And then yet he still continues to win tournament after tournament after tournament. And yet, because I call so many of these events for the PGA Tour, I cannot wrap my head around him being an elite golfer because of what I watch him do with his lower body. That ends this week. I'm over that because he has shown me now at the biggest events against the biggest stars that he can play. But I don't think his game matches Augusta National. But if it does, 4 wins in less than 2 months, and the 4 wins that he had were specific and big, I think you'd have to put him in the all-time heater category with 4 wins in the course of 2 months. I am not playing him for 2 reasons. A, I don't trust him. B, I don't trust him. And so he could go out and just blow the doors off everybody, and I'd be hot at that. So I'm going to stay away and just say, listen, I don't have anything on him, and I'm good with that. But he's a wild card, certainly for me.
It's so fascinating what he's been able to accomplish so quickly. Looking at some of the questions that we've got in the chat, and keep them coming, and it looks like we're just a few likes short of getting some Paramount Plus gift cards out there. David is asking here, Andy, about Tony Finau. He says, I'll just say it. What happened to Tony Finau? Dude disappeared off the earth. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but he's not entirely wrong, is he?
Yeah, it's been a disappointing season for Finau, big time. And I liked him last week at the Valero, And he was fine. He finished top 30. He actually hit the ball pretty well and just couldn't putt, which has been his biggest bugaboo all season, is he hasn't been able to make any putts. The ball striking's actually been okay. It's not been that bad, but his putting has just been so horrendous. Finau's another guy where you have to think course history versus recent form, right? Finau hasn't been impressive all season, right? But he's got 3 top 10s and 4 appearances at Augusta. For whatever reason, Finau is another guy similar to Xander where he plays well in major championships. He just does. Now, when I say play well, I'm talking about finishing top 10, top 15, top 25. Again, similar to Xander, I'm dubious about his chances of being able to win. But I do think that Finau will play well this week. And I think that you probably will get a bit of a discount on him in DFS as well, because the perception is still that he doesn't have it right now.
You know, Rick, I had him 3 rounds last week, and so I watched exactly what Andy was talking about, and I can remember off the top of my head at least 4, maybe 5 inside of 3.5 feet that not only did he not make them, they didn't even hit the cup. It was like the most embarrassing putting performance that I have seen in a really, really long time. But the discount that Andy's talking about, it's such a weird, unique week again, and that's why we're here to educate the people at home on how to bet the Masters. There's only 91 players, so when you're betting somebody for a top 20, it's not the same as when it's a full field event at 144 or 156. So you've got to keep that in mind. So there's not as much scary moments if you're playing a Tony Finau at a top 20 at a discount, because he doesn't have to beat 120 guys. He only has to beat 71 guys. And that's a big, big difference. That said, with the putter he has right now, wouldn't touch him.
Yeah, he's putting like I am, man. 3.5 feet. Don't even touch the cup. That's straight out of my book. There's some good questions in here, so keep them coming. This one I kind of like. This is fun. Daniel asks about FOMO bets, fear of missing out. Guys that I mean, I'm guilty of this. I bet Victor Hovland every week, Andy, because I'm not going to miss out on any of his wins, and I don't. That's just like first bet of the week, Victor, and then I'll start figuring out my card from there. Who fits into the family and friends category for you, Andy?
Okay, so, well, Xander, you guys know Xander's always been my favorite golfer, but one question that I always kind of ask a lot of my golf group chats, I'm curious to know who it is for you, Coach, and Rick, but there's always that one guy that doesn't make it for you, that you can't fit on your card, but you're still you're terrified of it because you understand the logic, but you can't bet them all, right? You can't bet all these guys, there's 10 guys under 20-1, right? You can't bet all of them. That's just a stupid strategy, right? So for me this week, the one guy that I couldn't get there with, I just didn't have room, that probably scares me the most, probably Brooks, who's a very popular pick this week for good reason.
He's the worst guy to be scared about too.
And
I just don't be
him.
Andy, don't be. I watched him hit for 2 days last week. He is as far from his A game as he's ever been in his life. In his
heart out, and he will hold it up over your head.
Yeah, I don't care. Real quick, my guy, and I believe, Rick, you were the one that gave us this stat on First Cut. When I heard this stat, I now put $100 on this player every single week. Okay. That if you bet $100 on Colin Morikawa, every tournament he's played in, every tournament, just blindly played him, you'd be up over $11,000 right now since the start of his career. Yeah. When I heard that stat, I can't have FOMO anymore for Morikawa.
No, because Colin Morikawa, Coach, and I assume Sepp Straka also makes that list.
Well, I mean, that's an automatic for me. I mean, because believe me, it's worth whatever I spend for the 1 week, and I got it a few weeks ago to come down on Kyle Porter. I'm always for that.
So good. Okay, I think we are close to the Paramount Plus thing. I'll have to get Jacob to confirm, but make sure you hit the like button. Jacob will put a $100 gift card in the chat for Paramount Plus, and then also we'll continue to answer your questions. I've got some props that we can look at on the other side as well, but first we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
The Covenant will not stop.
There is something within us. Something sacred. Something worth protecting. Silver King, on me.
And we're back. Obviously, Paramount Plus big this week because you can watch HQ, you can watch the Masters, and Jacob informs me you can also watch Paw Patrol if you're into that kind of programming. I don't hate it. Let's look at a couple of props here, gentlemen. We'll continue to answer questions from the chat. I want to look at some of the nationality bets. We don't have Mark Immelman here. This is usually right up his alley, but we can look through some of the different nationalities. I'm looking at top European right now. The favorites are Jon Rahm at plus 320. Viktor Hovland and Rory McIlroy are both plus 550, with Shane Lowry and Matt Fitzpatrick at 10-1. There are obviously more guys on this list, Andy, but they get longer and longer from here. Is there a name on this list that you would consider at their odds to be the top European?
Yeah, I was looking at Lowry. You mentioned Lowry at 10-1. Lowry's a guy I bet outright at 80-1. He's playing great golf right now. Lowry has been consistently playing really well all season, right? And it's, he's had his chances, right? He almost won at the Honda. But he's a guy that has consistently performed in majors before. Not only did he win the Open Championship, but he's also finished second at a U.S. Open in Oakmont. He's top 25 at the Masters his last 2 years. I think he's going to have a great week, although I got some thoughts on Rahm too. Like we'll get to it later, I'm sure, when we do our best bets. I watched Rahm's press conference yesterday. I mean, he looks so locked in right now. And you're kidding yourself if you don't think that he is fully aware of who overtook him in the official world golf rankings last week.
Well, plus 320 if Jon Rahm does indeed become the top European. Those are the shortest available odds. Coach, anything on this board speak to you?
Well, and I'm going to say this with all due respect in the world about Shane Lowry, a very, very prominent caddy on the PGA Tour told me years and years ago. He says, Coach, he said, with the way the game is trending, you will never see an out-of-shape golfer win the Masters. And since he told me this in 2012, 2013, look at the list of guys that have won. And the reason for that is this walk. We've talked about it with Tiger all week. If you've never been to Augusta National, this is one of the hardest walks in all of competitive golf. You just never can tell on TV because of the way they present it. It's very hilly. It's very difficult. And you're not going to see an out-of-shape golfer. And I love Shane Lowry, but that's what he is right now. So I don't like him this week because of that. I just don't. But I love Viktor Hovland. You're going to give me plus 550. I think Jon Rahm, yes, he's locked in, but I think Viktor Hovland, when he shows up, he's a top 10 machine. So I'll take the value over the guy that has not won since the U.S. Open, despite being locked in, because I think he's really had to adjust to being a father and that schedule, and I think it's affected him on the golf course. I really, really do.
Okay, so plus 550, as Coach mentioned, for Viktor Hovland. The same odds as Rory McIlroy. Let's just talk Rory real quick here, gentlemen. Andy, we'll start with you. I think Tiger playing is good for Rory, but I don't think it's changes all that much. The idea of him trying to complete the Grand Slam, that's an internal thing. It's not necessarily an external thing. Like, yeah, maybe he won't be asked about it as much, but he knows it's there. Like, that's still going to continue to exist for him. So I actually prefer the narrative around him playing last week, the fact that this course is going to be wet, as opposed to Tiger somehow helping Rory.
Yeah, in terms of the media attention, of course, Tiger's a vacuum. It's going to suck up some questions and attention away from Rory. But I don't think it's necessarily going to have an impact, as you mentioned, on Rory's internal battle with the pressure that he puts on himself this week. Rory has said before that he gets physically ill around Masters time sometimes because that pressure is so great. And we're talking about a guy that, he came out of the gates. He won 4 major championships so early in his career, and we haven't seen him do anything since 2014. He front loaded all of his success so quickly, and it's not like Rory's bad now. He's still, a top 10 player in the world. He wins a fair amount on the PGA Tour, wins on the European Tour, but we're going on 7 years now where he hasn't won a major championship, and he hasn't even given himself too many opportunities, right? He hasn't even had too many times in the last 7 years where he's led a major championship on the back nine. And we've been saying, oh, okay, this is Rory's to lose. So I still think the pressure is going to get to him this week. I still think probably he's going to be having to battle those demons at Augusta. The one thing that I will say does work in Rory's advantage this week is I do like the turf conditions and how it sets up for him. Rory on a soft golf course is the Rory that you want, right? Look at what he did to Congressional at that U.S. Open, where we got all that rainfall before the U.S. Open, similar to what we got this week. And suddenly Rory's carry distance and how high he can hit the ball with his drivers and his long irons played right into his hands, right? So we're going to get somewhat similar conditions, at least on the first 2 days this week. So I would say the argument for Rory, course fit, right? But I'm not sure I'm totally buying into the fact that Tiger is totally shielding the pressure that he puts on himself personally.
Well, it is interesting, Coach, because I think Andy nailed it. The contending or lack of it at major championships for Rory McIlroy, honestly, has been because he's played himself out of it in the first round often, right? I mean, remember what he did at Portrush, and then he tried to battle back and make the cut, and he just missed out. I mean, how many Masters in a row has he gone out and shot something over par in round one? Are we going to learn a lot about Rory McIlroy's chances by, Thursday afternoon, depending on where he stands on the leaderboard?
I don't think there's any question. And let's remember, he's in the last group of the entire day. So we're going to know what the entire day looks like before Rory even finishes. So we'll have that comparison in real time. And I think if there's ever going to be a year for Rory to do it, because I think in the 3 years that I was out there calling the Masters, and I would go out and find him on practice rounds, and he was always by himself. And he's a social guy. And that really surprised me that he chose that particular week to always practice by itself. And it really showed me how much being a part of this very, very small group of golfers means to him, and it would mean to any of us. So I think if there's ever a year that this would be the year. Real quickly, Rick, because if you're going to type something in the chat, make sure it's right. If you want to come after me, just make sure you come at me right. Coach, Jimmy Walker won, and he is, I don't even read the rest of it. Jimmy Walker's never won the Masters. So get your Masters championships right. Then they said another horrible coach take. Lowry squats like 450 or something. Squatting 450 as opposed to cardio and being in shape. I just want to go back quickly, Rick, to let's just go 2007. All right. Zach Johnson, Trevor Immelman, Angel Cabrera, Mickelson, Schwartzel, Watson, Scott, Spieth, Watson, Willett, Sergio, Tiger, Dustin, Hideki. What do they all have in common? I rest my case. Rick, carry on.
I'd make some arguments about two of those guys, but the rest, yes. The rest of those guys very much.
You know what I'm saying? They're powerful. Powerful's different than out of shape. It just is.
And look at the coach. He knows what it looks like to be in shape. Trust me. All right.
Thank you.
Coach, I'm going to bounce this right back to you. Jacob, scroll me on down to the top Asian, please, because this is a small group. We kind of already discussed Hideki Matsuyama a little bit here, Coach. He is obviously the favorite to be the top Asian player, but there are big question marks. Then you look at some of the other guys in this tier. Keita Nakajima, he's the amateur. Takumi Kanaya, who we saw at the match play. KH Lee, Siwoo Kim, and then, of course, Sungjae Im rounding out this group. So if you're not necessarily a believer in Hideki Matsuyama, I actually believe that this category of nationality bet is one that you can exploit a little bit.
Yeah, there's no question. Siwoo Kim's the guy here because very quietly he had a top 15, I believe a top 12 a year ago, and that always is like the quiet guy coming in. Nobody's paying attention to him. He's 6 or 7 shots back. That's who Siwoo Kim is. Sungjae is a very dynamic iron player. We know that. But I just don't remember seeing him too much in the form the last couple of months. And to me, form matters when you come into the Masters. Remember about Decky, everybody, that since he won in Hawaii, he had to pull out of the Masters the players an hour before his tee time, which means it's flaring up late. Am I right? And then what happened last week at the Valero Texas Open? He had to withdraw in the middle of a round, which means what? It flared up. Do you really want to bet on a golfer who is flaring up in his neck and his back the last 2 starts? I would say no. And so I would stay away from him, and I would play Siwoo Kim.
Siwoo Kim and Sungjae Im, Andy, both plus 250. Then there's a pretty significant gap to KH Lee at 8-1. As I mentioned, Takumi Kanaya, he's 10-1. And Keita Nakajima is 12-1. Do you have a an opinion here on top Asian with these odds that we have from Caesar Sportsbook.
I'd probably lean Siwoo Kim with coach here. I just think I look at Siwoo was great at the Masters last year, right? And he is the type of guy, we've seen him win the Players before at 500 to 1, right? He's the type of guy that he has elite performances in him. Now, that's not me saying that Siwoo Kim's an elite golfer, but it's me saying Siwoo Kim can play with the elite golfers for 1 week. People forget how many times Siwoo Kim has won under the age of 26, including a Players Championship, right? So the issue with Siwoo Kim, the reason why he's not talked about like some of the other elite golfers under the age of 26 is because his bad weeks are so bad, right? And he mixes in his good ones with a lot of bad ones. But I think if you're looking at Siwoo Kim for 1 week, who has the highest chance of popping, especially when you consider Hideki's injury concerns into the mix, he'd be the guy I go with here as well.
There's a question in the chat from Dan Anderson that says, does Bubba have any magic left to be relevant this week? Which I think is a pretty good segue into one of my favorite props, the top lefty, coach. Like these guys have nothing in common except for what side of the brain they use. And Bubba Watson is indeed the favorite to be the top lefty this week at plus 180, with Brian Harman at plus 225, Robert McIntyre at plus 250, Garrick Higo at plus 550, and that man, Mike Weir, at 18 to 1. So, coach, it's a small pool of lefties. If we rule out Mike Weir, apologies, Mike, it's 4 golfers that we see on a regular basis. Find me a lefty who can come out on top of this pool.
Well, to me, it's pretty easy. It's Bubba Watson. This is a 10-year anniversary. He's been very vocal about how motivated he is. He once again showed up for the drive, chip, and putt on Sunday, which means he's completely engaged and ready to go because he loves that more than anything. Brian Harman's the only guy on this list, in my opinion, that can compete with Bubba all the way through the 4 rounds. But also, he's one of those guys that always seems to have a bad round that costs him at Augusta National. He's a good little player, but when he gets to the Masters, to me, Bubba's such a dominating figure as far as lefties are concerned. He's a 2-time champion. So for me, this is pretty easy.
Brian Harman plus 225, Robert McIntyre plus 250. Andy, I like the McIntyre magic. I'm not sure I love the number, but he hits it far, and he played well here last year. I was hoping to see this kind of in the 3.5 to 1 range, but if I'm not a professional bettor, should I care about like the 1 point?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was hoping to get a little bit more on Bobby Mack because I like Bobby Mack too. Here's the thing about Bobby Mack. He's never missed a cut in a major championship in his life, right? He's actually been surprisingly really good in these major championships. He finished 12th at the Masters last year. He's already got a couple top 10s at the Open as well. Now, he's not somebody that you're going to see a lot on the PGA Tour, right? He does the majority of his work on the European Tour. So he's probably not a household name to the majority of fans that are watching here in the US, especially when you compare him to someone like Bubba Watson. But you talk to any of the people that follow the European Tour closely and are betting and grinding the European Tour every week, they've got a lot to say on Bobby Mack, and they believe in his talent. They believe that he's going to be a future staple on the Ryder Cup team. And we've already started to see some flashes, right, with some of those major championship performances. So I'm with you. I like Bobby Mack here at plus 250. I was hoping for 3 to 1. As you mentioned, maybe you're right because he's not the household name as a Bubba or a Harman, but maybe the books are onto it a little bit as well.
Here are the 7 major championships that Robert McIntyre has played. And I see that Jacob has just dropped a Paramount Plus pin into the chat. So, oh boy, have at it. Good luck. The Masters, as we mentioned, imagine how fast these people's fingers are typing, trying to get that pin in. Masters, obviously 1 trip there, T12, that was last year. 2 trips to the PGA Championship, made both cuts, T66, T49. Open Championship, here's where it gets really good. 2 trips, 2 top 10s. US Open, a 56th and a 35th for Robert McIntyre. So yeah, it does seem to play well when he gets on the big time stage. There is kind of an interesting situation that we get this week here. And Jacob, if you can get me the top Spanish player, I'd be thrilled with that. So Obviously, John Rahm is the heavy favorite here, coach. He is minus 335. Sergio Garcia is plus 250, and Jose Maria Olazabal is 25-1. That's it. Three Spanish players. Again, apologies, Jose, but if you throw him out, isn't this a matchup between John Rahm and Sergio Garcia, and Sergio is plus 250, which is, if this was an actual matchup, Rahm would not be that big of a favorite.
No, he wouldn't be. It'd probably be, if it was a tournament matchup, he might be minus 170, I guess, probably minus 160. And let's not forget, the person who is a master champion between these two is not John Rahm. It is absolutely Sergio Garcia, who got the job done 7 years ago on this course. And what does he have in common with a lot of Masters champions? He's a really good iron player. So to me, there's no way I would lay minus 335. But Sergio at plus 250, and all he's got to do is beat one guy in John Rahm. Now, he's a star, certainly, but Sergio has the credentials around this place to get the job done.
Am I wrong here, Andy? I mean, what are the true John Rahm Sergio Garcia matchup odds?
Probably Rahm like minus 225, right? I mean, think about it.
I didn't even have it high enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I like, you look at how Rahm's matched up again. Rahm's like minus 160. I think now it's shot up, but he was minus 130 against Scottie Scheffler. It's golf, right? I mean, it's a matchup. So they can't make him like minus 200, minus 300, minus 400 in a golf matchup, right? So I agree. This is probably, you're getting some value here on Sergio Garcia. Now, Sergio, since winning the Masters, not just at the Masters, at major championships in general, he's been terrible, right? So you're starting to get the narrative coming in around, well, did Sergio kind of just get his, or is he still hungry, right? And I don't know. He's a guy who is getting not a lot of ownership in DraftKings, not a lot of chatter around him. He's been kind of quiet this week, but he obviously has all the tools to succeed at Augusta. So if you're betting in this market, top Spanish player, Sergio is the only way I can go.
Okay, let me run through a couple questions here from the chat. We'll hit our best bets and we'll get out of town. There is a question from Sebastian in regards to Sam Burns. I just glossed over him for a second, coach. I mentioned the 3 wins in the last 12 months, but we've got the debutante thing. Burns is a very powerful player. I continue to say that I think he plays the modern game. I mean, what's the upside? What's the ceiling on Sam Burns this week?
Well, he's one of those guys, and for the traditional golf fan, they have a hard time really buying into Sam Burns because they want so badly. And we see it here in the chat. We see it with fans that watch our respective shows. A lot of them just don't want the new breed to take over. They don't want us talking about the new breed. But Sam Burns is here for a reason. And when you get into the thralls of the pressure, and I think one thing that fans need to understand at home that never have really been close to the Masters, maybe have never been to the Masters, only seen it on TV. When you're in it, when you're in the pressure cooker, when you're on site, there is no other feeling like it. And Sam Burns has that it factor, gentlemen, that very few players have, that you can throw him into any pressure cooker and he is comfortable. It's home for him. So I could see him, and certainly he still is ahead of the curve, Rick, when it comes to betting number, and you can still get value on him. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if we saw Sam Burns in contention second 9 on Sunday.
Ooh, I hope that's true. That would be very, very fun. Sam Burns, you can still get around the 50-1 mark.
Yeah.
So plenty of value there if you're interested. And it took us about 49 minutes into the show before T. Leone asked about Louis Oosthuizen. He says, why have we not mentioned Louis, Andy? Do we not learn?
I understand the argument for Louis this week, right? Like he finished top 5 in 3 of the 4 majors last year. And coming into those majors, it wasn't like he was playing all that great either. So do we have to overlook what Louis does at the Honda Classic, at the match play, and just kind of acknowledge, okay, this is a guy who's proven to us before that regardless of recent form, for whatever reason, he's going to show up in these major championships. I get all that. My issue with Louis is twofold. First of all, I don't love the fact that he's playing with Tiger, which is another reason that got me off Niemann a little bit. Now, Louis is an experienced guy. He's played in crowds before, right? He's won a major championship. He gets it. He understands it. He's a cool customer. But I don't like that spot for him, similar to the way that I talked about with Xander, where Xander's group, like no one's going to be following Xander and Cantlay this week when Tiger's on the course. And I don't love that spot for him. I like it. I trust him a little bit more than the third player, Niemann, right? Who's even less experienced under that atmosphere. But I couldn't find myself getting there with Louis this week. I think he's maybe a guy I'll probably be more interested in him at the Open Championship, right? At St. Andrews. When we get to St. Andrews, of course, obviously he's won at before. Augusta, he's been hit or miss. He's played well at Augusta before, but he's also struggled at Augusta mightily. So I understand the argument fully for Louis, but he wasn't somebody I got to this week.
I was so stoked for Joaquin Niemann, and I still am like kind of stoked, but I hated to see him with Tiger. Oh, maybe I shouldn't, but it feels like a two-shot swing when you play with Tiger.
Well, I think it's to me, the perfect spot for a player is either 3 groups ahead of Tiger or at least 3 groups behind Tiger, because that's how many fans are going to be around him. And the way the course is laid out, just because you're a hole ahead doesn't mean that you're out of the Tiger stuff, because they usually jump a hole ahead, and those will jump a hole ahead. So you're always facing 2 or 3 holes. And if you're with it, and you haven't experienced the Tiger effect that we've talked about for 25 years, and he hasn't played in 17 months, sometimes there's a tendency to forget about that. And all of a sudden, when you shock your body and shock your system, and yes, Louis is about as calm a collector as there ever is on the PGA Tour, but even he's going to be affected, and Niemann's going to be affected. The only thing I would do with those 2 is fade them somehow, depending on what your sportsbooks have. But I wouldn't play either guy this week, certainly not on Thursday and or Friday.
I mean, listen, I know I get nervous watching Tiger on TV. I couldn't imagine playing golf with the guy. That's what's going to happen for Joaquin Niemann and Louis Oosthuizen this week. I think it's a pretty good segue into our best bets. And Coach, I'm going to bounce this right back to you. We already got your Cam Smith top 10. Everybody's aware of that. I'm going to ask you about Greg's best bet, because Greg did exactly what you said here. He's kind of fading the Joaquin Niemann stuff. Adam Scott over Joaquin Niemann, even money. From what I heard, I think you might be okay with this.
It's a great bet. I love that bet. The only thing that scares me a little bit is that Adam Scott has a tendency every now and then to lose, the blood rushes to his head, and he forgets how to control his speed with that putter. With that being said, if he putts good, he's in pretty good form right now. So I like this play.
Mike McClure also had Adam Scott over Joaquin Niemann as his best bet, and we've shared some of these with you over the course of the week. Jacob went with Justin Thomas over Jon Rahm. Kyle went with Tiger to make the cut. Andy, you have a matchup where you are taking Scottie Scheffler as the favorite over Jon Rahm. Is that right?
I'm actually taking Jon Rahm. I may have screwed that up in the outline.
Okay.
But I'm actually
Rahm over Scottie Scheffler.
Yeah, I'm taking Rahm over Scottie Scheffler. Look, and I alluded to this before with Jon Rahm, but I have this theory with Jon Rahm where what's the biggest struggle that Jon Rahm has had all year? It's been the short game and the putter, right? He has not been putting even field average, right? And historically, Rahm's pretty good putter, right? So it's been really surprising to see him not putt well at all this year. Maybe he's one of those players that has been negatively affected by the greens books, right? This is the first year where we don't have any of the greens books. And what else can explain the poor putting? I'm not sure. It's just a theory, right? But now he goes to Augusta, where nobody has greens book. Maybe the playing field's a little bit more level, and he returns to a course that he's putted great at before. Maybe this is kind of just what the doctor ordered for a guy like Jon Rahm. And you started to see, we don't have stats from Texas, right? But we started to see at the match play, it did start to look like he was making more putts and gaining a little bit more confidence on the green. I just think Rahm knows exactly what happened to him with Scheffler and the world golf ranking. And I think he's going to beat Scottie Scheffler pretty handily this week.
It's personal now for Jon Rahm. He gets to take the crown back. There are probably a lot of scenarios. Have you seen this, Andy? I haven't seen all the scenarios, but there's probably 5 guys who can be the number 1 player this week with a win, depending on other situations.
I was going to ask you, what does Rahm have to do? I don't even think he has to win.
Probably not.
I think, I think he has to, like, if Rahm finishes top 7 and Scheffler misses the cut, I think he's the number 1 player in the world again.
Yeah, it's
That's what it is, something like that.
yeah, it's not far. It's not far off. I'll see if I can find it. But Coach, we're gonna do a couple more things. We're gonna get your pick to win, which we talked about on what day is it? Tuesday's mega preview pod. And also, I kind of just want to get like your sentimental, like you get to pick the final group on Sunday. Like, what two guys going off number one in the final group would you most like to see?
To me, it's really, really easy. And I saw someone in the chat said, hey, I'll be happy to be wrong and Tiger win on Sunday and lose all my money. Well, if I've wasted enough money on stupid bets this year, I can put a little bit on Tiger Woods to win this thing and think pie in the sky. If Tiger and Rory were in the final group on Sunday together, to me, there's nothing that supersedes that. You got a chance to join a group of 6, and then you got a chance to win your 16th major championship after nearly having your leg amputated, nearly dying in a car crash less than 15 months ago, and you're going to put those two storylines in the final group on Sunday. I don't think there's anything bigger than that.
That's the answer. That's the only, I mean, you could go with a hipster answer, but
the internet would break, television would break,
everything.
It's the answer. Okay, if it's not Tiger or Rory, Andy, does Xander make your final pairing? Xander and somebody else?
Well, Xander would be personal preference, right? But okay, we gotta talk about like non-Tiger category, right? So if we're sticking in the Tiger category, JT Tiger would be pretty great too, because we know how close they are. So to have JT mentor mentee in that final pairing together, that would be great. Now we're talking non-Tiger category here. I think Brooks and DJ would be a good one, right? You throw Brooks in with another one of those heavy hitters, whether it's Rahm or DJ or Rory, or you could even go like a young gun one. What if we had Hovland and Morikawa duking it out, right? So there are a lot of good answers in there, but I think you have to separate it to Tiger category, non-Tiger category.
From our buddy on Twitter, Nosferatu, who is like the OWGR king, there are 5 golfers who can reach number 1 in the world, and it all depends on Scottie Scheffler and what he does. But Jon Rahm at least needs a solo 6th or better. Collin Morikawa needs at least a 2-way tie for 3rd. Victor needs at least a solo 3rd. Cantlay needs at least a solo runner-up. And Coach, your guy Cam Smith can get there. He needs to at least win it. But it is possible that we wake up on Monday morning and your man Cam Smith is the number 1 player in the world. And I imagine your pockets are a lot heavier.
I'm going to say this right now. Rick, I respect you more than anything. Your golf knowledge, the way you host shows, the way you are at Sportsline. You and the rest of this entire First Cut team will want to turn your phones off if Cam Smith wins the Masters this week. Because, yes, I've bet real money on Cam. Full disclosure, Cam and Tiger Woods. But the Cam money is the money that I'm really looking at. Tiger's just, if it happens, I want to be in the mix with him. But Cam Smith is my guy. And Cam Smith is somebody I'm never going to sleep on again. And I think right now, starting this week, maybe starting at the Players, he's going to start to elevate himself. So every time he shows up, we have to start talking about him with DJ and Rory and Bryson and Brooks and all these guys. But you got to start talking about Cam Smith too. And he'll show that this week.
So if Cam Smith is like in the final group on Sunday, I'm just going to proactively block you, Coach, so that just in case.
And I would respect that.
Coach is picked to win Cam Smith 16-1. He also gave that out earlier in the week on the Mega Preview Pod. So we are rocking and rolling here. So Andy, you get to put a bow on this live chat on Monday morning. Who will wake up as the 2022 Masters champion?
You know my answer, Rick. We've done enough shows together. I had this answer in December when we did a major previews pod. I think it's Justin Thomas for me. I think the addition of Bones on the bag, that was, and I've used this analogy before, it's like when a NFL team gets their quarterback and they hire that offensive-minded head coach to go with the quarterback, right? Like this was a strategic decision by Justin Thomas. They've been to Augusta, by the way. They've flown down to Augusta a couple times already in the past couple of months, him and Bones. And you want to talk about a difficult wind, a westerly wind, right? I think that's only going to rev up the experience factor a little bit more. And I'm getting one of the best iron players in the world who's playing excellent golf right now with maybe the guy, maybe outside of Tiger, that knows Augusta more than anyone else, Jim Bones McKay, who's won 3 Masters with Phil Mickelson, played this place for 2 decades straight. And the form box is working, and he's got his boy Tiger here. He wants to make his man Tiger proud. I think it's JT's time. I really, really do.
Andy, let me tell you something, because I have this gut feeling that you and I are going to be doing a lot of shows together in the next several years.
So.
And so you're going to hear this many times from me, but there are levels to this game. And I hate that on our first show together, I have to show you that firsthand. But the entire crew in One and Done picked Justin Thomas, and now you're jumping on the same train. Have we not watched JT in the last year? Have we not seen him just fall down a hill at the Valspar when he had a chance to win? This man hasn't won in over 12 months because he can't get it done right now. So you think he's going to walk in Tiger's shadow and win on Sunday? Oh, no. I don't even think he finishes top 10, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I don't.
Wow.
I don't.
I mean, you guys could make this. You guys could make this.
I was gonna say I would do a JT Cam Smith, coach.
You want to do that?
If you're up for it.
I was willing to give you a top 10, but I'll do that. All right. So our normal showdown here is $100. Full disclosure. Done. All right. I got Cam Smith. You have JT. Love it.
Done.
Love it. But the rules are. Oh, it feels so good. Oh, that feels so good. And the Venmo has to be paid in less than 24 hours after the event is done.
Deal. Okay. Last question. Last question. If both of them miss the cut.
No. Yeah. It's push.
Okay. All right. Cool.
It's a push.
Cool.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you can't collect when you miss the cut.
No. Cool.
Yeah.
Cam Smith for the coach, and Andy has Justin Thomas in a showdown wager. We'll see how it all plays out. But gentlemen, we are just hours away from kicking off our Super Bowl. Absolutely stoked. Thank you guys for joining, everybody tuning in. It's been a lot of fun doing a Wednesday live chat. But for now, let me give a big thanks to producer Jacob, does all that hard work behind the scenes. Andy Lack, thank you very much in his debut. You can find him on Twitter at ADP Lack Sports. And of course, the coach can be found on Twitter at The Coach Rules. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.